Okay, class, today is election day, and today's lesson is going to be all about voting. Let's take a look at how the mechanics of voting work in the United States. Voting is an American constitutional right. The United States Constitution, which is the law of the United States, provides all adult citizens the right to vote. There are going to be some specifics in this presentation, like the laws and some of the offices we talk about. I'm not going to go into great detail. Just want to talk about how voting works, okay? So the right to vote allows citizens of the United States to determine how they're governed, elect the people who make the laws, and change the lives and the lives of all around them. Okay, voting is considered a right and a privilege. To be able to vote in the United States, you must first and foremost be a citizen of this country. You have to be a resident of the state you're voting in. You can't live in Washington and vote on a Washington ballot if you're a citizen of Idaho. You would have to vote on that ballot where you are registered and a resident. You have to be 18 years of age. You have to register to vote, which means you have to fill out a form attesting to the fact that you are a citizen and also provide some other documentation. And you cannot be under supervision for a felony conviction. So bottom line is you got to be a citizen, you got to be 18, and you can't really be in deep trouble with the law. What is voting? A voting definition, it means a formal indication of a choice between two or more candidates or courses of actions, expressed typically through a ballot or show of hands by voice. Now, I know we can vote in a class and raise our hands and decide if we want to do or not do something. I'll ask you guys your opinion and you'll show an emoji on your screen. That's actually voting. You can also, take a little poll, turn in a name. When I asked you guys yesterday how many people wanted this lesson and people voted yes, no, or maybe, that was voting. Formal voting occurs when you make choices on a ballot and submit for counting in an election. Voting can be for a person to hold an office. It can also be for a ballot measure, ballot initiatives that changes or determines a law. How often are there elections in the United States? Elections are held throughout the year in most places. Every November, there's usually an election here. There are primary elections, and those are to choose candidates to run in general elections that occur earlier in the year. These elections may also include ballot initiatives, and they might include local offices. So, for instance, this spring, we had a primary election where people chose the candidates for governor and for president, and they also voted on some local offices. Then there are general elections. General elections are held on the first Tuesday in November. They occur every year, and they include both partisan and nonpartisan races for city, county, state, and federal office. Okay, partisan. Those are offices where candidates declare a political party they're aligned with, and that usually happens because a political party gives you some funding, usually some money, and they usually have a platform, means you agree with some of their ideals, and it gets you in with some group of people who think and believe the same things you do, and it attracts those people also to vote for you. Nonpartisan are offices where candidates are not associated with a political party. That's where you just sign up and you run. So obviously, like when we have school elections, they're nonpartisan. But a lot of city and county elections are nonpartisan as well. I believe the mayor is a nonpartisan race here. How often are there elections in the United States? Well, elections are held throughout the year in most places. Local elections, these may be for mayor or local office and may occur during any point in an election cycle, usually in the spring or in the fall. And if they're in the fall, they're the first Tuesday in November. State and federal elections, they may occur any year. General elections always occur in November, though. State and U.S. representatives are elected every 2 years. Governors and presidents are elected every 4 years. State and U.S. senators are elected every 6 years. This, 2020, is a presidential election year. All our state and U.S. representatives are up for election, as are the governor and the president. However, our senators are not. Our senators were up for election in 2018 and 2016, and this being different year out of their cycle, they are not up for election again until 2 years and 4 years from now. So they're not on the ballot. The representatives, the governor, and the president are. What is a ballot? How do they work? There's actually a picture right there of the ballot this year, and you can see the presidential choices. You can see the representative choices, and those are the federal offices. This ballot is the form you fill out when you vote. Depending on the state and its rules, ballots may be done usually about two ways: filled out in person, submitted at a polling place. In many states, this can occur before and through the end of election day. How does that occur? And it used to occur this way until 2008 here in this county. You went down to a local place, like for instance, I've always lived kind of on the south west part of town, and I voted either at the high school or St. Joe's. And I went in and went in a little area that was private and marked all those choices on the ballot and then turned it in, and they counted the vote. Now this is done at home. So the second way is to fill out at home and mail the ballot in. Generally, these must be postmarked by election day. So technically, you could still vote today and turn it in. And as long as the postmark was today, it would count. In some areas, that's being challenged. Many states may allow voting either way. Some states allow you to choose to vote by mail, or you can walk in and do it. You can't do both, though. You can only vote one time. Washington State, Oregon, and Colorado only do mail-in voting. Washington State, it's been that way throughout the state since 2011. Voting, what are things on a ballot? Why so many? Look at all those things. That's the second page of our local ballot. Okay, and you'll see the governor, the secretary of state, the state treasurer. You'll see commissioners on there. Okay, so what's on there? Well, sometimes there are initiatives and ballot measures. These are usually laws or changes to laws, like asking, hey, the legislature passed this law and we think it's unconstitutional. Do you agree or disagree? And you vote that way, and the law may be stricken down. Local offices. These may be races for school board or jurisdictional commissions, like you'll see on their Chelan County Commission. Also, some city offices are on here, usually races for mayor and city council. There are no mayor races in our area this year, though. County offices, races for sheriff, county commissions, and judges. And you'll see there's a nonpartisan judge race marked on there. State offices, and these are state representatives, senators, and the governor. And then federal offices, which is anything that's for a U.S. position, which is U.S. representatives, U.S. senators, and U.S. president. And so on the other page, I'm sure you saw the presidential candidates were on there, and also the candidates for a U.S. representative from our district. How are votes counted? Votes are verified and tallied by people who work at election boards. Election board officials verify voters by ID or signatures. Votes may be counted by a machine or computer. They may be counted manually. Precincts are places that count and report a large number of votes in an area. Precincts report those vote totals to state offices. The total votes shown on media sources come from a variety of local precincts and state offices. The media does not count the votes. The votes are counted by the places where the votes are cast. Okay, so I have a couple examples there. There was a congressional race from a few years ago, shows Dave Reichert winning our area. And that is the actual vote count out of Chelan County. That was provided to the state, and then the state counted all the votes of the other counties, and then Congressman Reichert actually won that election, okay? That was not a media count. Now, those do show up in the media because the media reports those results, but they do not count the votes, okay? How is the president elected? What is the Electoral College? And if you're paying attention to the presidential election, you may hear some of this and understand why do they pay attention to some states more than others. Well, the president is one office that is elected differently. In all ballot elections for office, except for president, a simple majority of votes result in a candidate win. So, for instance, if candidate A has 101 votes, candidate B has 100, candidate A wins because he has one more vote. That's how it works for any city office, county office, state office, governor, and it works that way for Senate and representative. For president, it's different. In U.S. presidential elections, the winner is decided by the candidate who wins the most votes in what is called the Electoral College. The Electoral College is the total of 538 votes used to elect the president. Each state is awarded an amount of electoral votes depending upon their population. So if you look at that little map there, and that actually has the results from the 2016 election on it, you can see that the larger states like Texas, they get 38 votes. They have a lot of population. California has 55. Smaller states like Montana, even though it's large in area, it has a small population, it only gets 3. So this is designed to weigh out and kind of equal the voice of how many Americans there, but also give the states some power. Okay. Where is our state at? Okay, we have 12 electoral votes, which not a huge number. We're kind of in the middle of the mix. Okay. That's what we had in 2016. Okay. So the candidate who wins the most votes in each state wins all that state's electoral votes. So for instance, if a candidate wins one more vote, let's say one candidate has 1,000,001 votes and the other million go to the other candidate, the one that has one more vote gets all 12 of our electors. Okay. So it kind of skews a little bit. So the candidate who wins the most electoral votes overall is elected president. And it's all on who wins a state. So when you win the vote in a state, you win all those electors. Here's an electoral college map and a popular vote from an election in 2000. A candidate can win the popular vote and still lose the election if they don't win the most electoral votes. That happened here. It's also happened in a couple of other elections. In this election, President Bush actually got about 540,000 fewer votes than Albert Gore. But President Bush had more electoral votes because he won more votes in a group of states that awarded him those electoral votes. And you may say, how does that happen? I'll tell you how it happens. For instance, in this election, there was a very close margin, only about 530 votes, I believe, in Florida, but he got a ton of electors out of that. Or in California, Mr. Gore won probably by over 1,000,000 votes. So it gets the individual vote up more, but the electoral vote, it doesn't equal out. You have to win a state to win those votes. So it takes 538 total votes in the Electoral College, 270 votes to win. Is there a possibility of a tie? Yes, there is. You divide that up, you could get 269, 269. That's a whole other ball of wax. Not going to go into right now. The bottom line I want you to understand is that every vote counts, but they're counted a little bit different for president. So bottom line is you got to win the most votes in a certain states to win all that state's electors. Here's how that plays on why candidates spend more time in certain areas. There are states like ours that vote usually for the Democrat. The candidates aren't going to spend their time here because they feel it's going to vote that one way or another. They will spend their time and money in a state like Pennsylvania or Michigan that is split really, really equally. And if they can get a few thousand more people to vote their way, they'll win all those votes in that state. And so that's why you hear about some of these states that are really close, like Pennsylvania, Michigan, Florida, and even Texas this year, because there's a close margin there. And those candidates for president want to win all those electoral votes. Okay. All right, voting. Who decides when an election is over? What decides it? Okay, so I got some pictures of major media on there. Does the media decide? No. The media will project who wins a race based on how the voting count has progressed. And there will be a point where they'll see, hey, 80% of the votes been counted in this state. This person's ahead of this person by a lot. They're going to win. They'll project it. But that is not the same as deciding who won it. Does the candidate decide? Does the candidate get to come out and say, hey, I'm ahead, I won, it's over? No. Candidates who are losing will usually concede to another. And generally in major elections, that happens publicly. Candidate will go, hey, good job, you beat me fair and square. He may even announce to all of his supporters at a rally or whatever that he lost. Candidates who are winning may claim victory. They may come out and say, hey, the votes are in, I've won. Neither one of those is official. It's only official or the jurisdiction where the elected office is held. Only the officials in that jurisdiction can declare a winner and that the election is over. And so I put on there Chelan County. They declare what our votes are. They determine when our part of the election is over. State of Washington, they count all the votes from us and the other counties, and they determine that. And then the United States Congress determines, like later on, they count that stuff. Okay, so it's all by the jurisdictions. The candidate and the media, they don't declare. They can say a lot of things, but it all comes down to the jurisdictions where the votes are. Okay, why are elections important? Because I know a lot of you may say, oh my God, every year people get worked up about the voting. I don't know. I don't want to vote. I think it's a bunch of yelling. It's a bunch of stuff that doesn't matter. Hear me out on this. Elections are important because they allow you to make changes to laws and elected officials based on what you believe and what you want. You have the power. You can pick. Elections allow you to have a voice in how you're governed. They let you have a voice in how laws are written, what rights you have, maybe what taxes you pay or don't pay, how government spends that tax revenue. All that is determined by the people you vote for. And those people you vote for, they're generally paid by your tax money. So you want to make sure if you're paying them that there's somebody you want to have there. Elections allow you to have a voice in how you and your family and friends are represented. You get to pick the type of people who represent you. Why should everyone vote? Why should I want to vote? Well, let's look at a few examples. Okay, you can change your life and the life of others through voting. Here's some examples of changes made because of voting, and these are big things. The 1860 presidential election. Abraham Lincoln was elected U.S. president. We wound up being in a civil war because of some of his beliefs about keeping our union together, and then eventually about slavery. And he actually issued the Emancipation Proclamation that ended slavery. Until then, people in the United States were actually allowed to own other people. Okay, and this had been an issue for several years, but Lincoln was the first one to do this. Okay, and so he freed those slaves. Had he not been elected, who knows how much longer that would have gone on. Okay, many of you probably don't know that until 1920, women were not allowed to vote. Only men were allowed to vote. How crazy is that? And there are actually more women in our population than men. However, the 1916 and 1918 congressional elections elected people who gave women the right to vote. And in 1920, voting rights for women was passed, and so they could vote, and that changed a lot of things for them. They had a voice in how they were governed. And if you're a girl, that's a big deal. Can you imagine not having a voice? That'd be like asking this class who wants to do something and saying, hey, all of this group doesn't get to vote. All right. 1960 and 1964 elections were big too. All right. In 1960 and 1964, the United States elected presidents. It was President Kennedy and then President Johnson who succeeded him, and senators and congressmen that eventually passed the Civil Rights Act and Voting Rights Acts. Okay, we went for 100 years after the ending of slavery without really defining the fact that you can't discriminate against people of color until President Kennedy stood up in 1963 and said, I want laws passed to end this. And then after he passed away and President Johnson became president and was reelected, the Congress got together and they passed the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act. And they made it illegal to discriminate against people of color. And they gave everyone equal access to voting. That was a big deal because people who were not white until that time were treated very poorly in parts of this country. And so a note on that, you say, president, that's millions of votes. Okay, well, President Kennedy was elected in 1960 by just over 100,000 votes. That's only 0.2%. Over 70 million people voted in that election. So those votes really counted. And those votes helped change history, just like the votes for those people in 1916 and 1918, and those votes in 1860. So voting matters. It matters when you vote for local offices, and it matters when you vote for federal offices, and it matters to you and everyone around you. So my advice, when you become 18 years old, register to vote. Learn about the issues and the candidates on the ballot. Figure out who represents what you think is best and vote. All right. Hope you got something out of this. Go ahead and fill out the form. Let me know what you think. Also, any feedback you want to let me. Have a great day. Thanks again.